For some reason, it wants to say that we're speaking British English. It must be my accent. I don't know.
I can switch to a Holiday in Garage if we have to. That's fine.
Nah, I don't think so. Hi, everyone. I am here with Aaron of Zurncentral, and you're calling yourself Centaur on online, right?
Yeah. It goes back. My brothers and I, we've been running Middle Earth content since about 2012 or so. And back in the day, we all took gang names to protect ourselves online. And so I go by Centaur, but on Facebook, everybody already knows that I'm Aaron. So
Yeah,
who cares?
yeah.
Yeah.
And Aaron, you run a competing channel, which I've been quite enjoying right now. Actually, watching your content, and you put out content quite regularly. Um, Not as much as me, who obsessively puts out every day right now, but almost. And and I just had an interview on Aaron's channel. Go and watch that one. Link will be in the description for my channel for this video here. But right now, I just wanted to start us off with you telling us about yourself and maybe how you got into bold action. What's your gaming career? What's your story?
Yeah. So, well, as I mentioned, I guess it first started out because my twin brother said, "Hey, I want to get into this Lord of the Rings miniatures game. It's a tabletop war game, so it's kind of like Risk, but not really." And I was like, "Okay, well, hey, if you're jumping into it, sure, I'll jump into it too."
Hmm.
And then the next thing you know, we start bringing in other friends. We start kind of creating our own local gaming group. And then he was like, "Hey, we should start a blog and tell other people what we think about the game," because there weren't really any at the time. There's like
Hmm.
one other blog that was doing it at the time. And so we started doing that. And now 13 years later, like, we brought in my other brother into the channel and we did a bunch of other stuff. And there was a lull of time there between updates where, like, I was looking around. I'm like, I don't really have any new armies that I want to buy. Years before, I'd kicked around in like, Warhammer Fantasy Battles 8th edition and 40K. But, like, I played Space Wolves literally like a couple of months right before the Flyers came out.
Ah,
So they were dead. Like, it
yeah,
didn't work.
that was the end
Spent
of
the whole
them.
game running and hiding. So
Yeah.
it just didn't feel quite right. And then I came across Bolt Action shortly after the pandemic.
Mm.
And I was like, these models look awesome. They look cool. My wife was from Poland. She spent 8 years in Poland when
Mm.
she was a kid. And so because of that, I was like, they're just now releasing like Polish models. I should just collect some, learn some history. Can't hurt for getting to know her family better. And then just decided to actually start playing some games in like 2021, 2022. And turned out that, I guess, having played other war games helped at least a little bit for thinking through, making sure you're actually playing objectives. You're not just getting, distracted by shooting at units and stuff. And decided I really enjoyed it. And then it wasn't until around 2023 or early 2024 that I was like, man, it might be fun to actually like write some of my notes down. So when I'm talking to people on Facebook, instead of just basically saying the same things, I can like say, well, here are my thoughts, and copy paste a link to a video. It makes
Yeah.
things a little bit easier because I can do the math. I can show the why behind stuff, might be a little bit easier. And literally the week that I was planning on starting my first recording is when they told me third edition's coming. And I said, well, never mind. we'll just we'll wait. So we'll see what the new edition's like. If I like it, maybe then we'll start recording. If I
Yeah.
don't like it, then maybe I'll record some second edition content and be one of the channels that has 42 people following it. And we're only slightly ahead of that right now, which is fine because, again, like, I don't do this full time. This is just for fun. My unicorn space, if you will, just to be imaginative and creative. But yeah, the result is I was like, I'm just gonna try it. I'm gonna talk to some people, see what they think about it. And it's been great getting feedback from people and seeing how much of it does actually resonate with people who have played with a lot more experience than I have. I've only been to like a half dozen tournaments myself,
Mm.
and so that's been fun. Kind of seeing what other people think from other parts of the world and how things work for them. And so it's been a great journey. It's
Mm.
been enjoyable. Yeah.
Would you say that your main gaming thing is still Middle Earth?
Mostly, yeah.
Yep.
Although Middle Earth just recently got a new edition update
Yeah,
as
they did.
well, and we're still waiting on some of the core books so that people can play the armies that they love a lot. But it's been a nice avenue for me to be like, hey, well, while we're waiting, you
Yeah.
know, there's a
Yeah.
game that has all the rules out, and you can get army lists for a lot of them
Yeah.
as free downloads.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's been kind of a nice way to kind of soft enter people in, and then they just borrow my minis because
Yeah.
I don't have a problem. I can technically stop whenever I want, you know. But yeah, so that's been fun, you know, just kind of getting people into it and helping them to, you know, kind of see
Mm.
a different way of playing, because obviously Bolt Action does do some things that are quite unique
Yeah.
as a gaming system.
Yeah.
Order dice probably being the biggest one, and they've been really enjoying that, so that's
Yeah.
good.
Having played Middle Earth myself, I find it a very different gaming experience.
Yeah,
Just switching between those two games, it's very, very different games.
yeah,
But yeah, there are ups and downs for both of them, I guess.
yeah,
Um, so going to your homepage, which I did,
yeah.
um, you can go and download a pack that you also put out. So not only am I working on a pack, you actually also put out a pack. Could you tell us a little bit about what made you want to do that, and why, and why did you pick? Because you made custom missions and stuff as well, which is really interesting. So tell us a little bit about the background for that pack.
Yeah. So, first of all, I hadn't intended to. And then when the third edition book dropped, I was looking, and the first thing that I jumped to, which other guys, I'm a friend of Joe Lint from the US WTC team.
Yep.
He was also really interested in looking at, which was the scenario builder. And kind of similar to kind of your thoughts on the video that you did for me, I looked at them and I'm like, some of these don't actually work together
Mm.
particularly well. And I was like, well, some of them work really nicely, which is awesome. And I
Yeah.
love some of this, but I also felt like in some respects, I could kind of already seeing the meta being drawn in specific directions
Yeah.
because of the various ways to score. And I was like, well, wouldn't it be nice if we incentivized, for example, taking snipers by having a scenario where, yes, it's kill points, but you also get unique victory points because your sniper is the one doing damage. And wouldn't it be nice if you just get points if you have a sniper at the end of the game and your opponent doesn't have one, which not
Mm.
only encourages a sniper duel, but it also means if you walk into a tournament without a sniper and you know that this is going to be one of the scenarios, you got to headhunt the other guy's man, because
Yep.
otherwise, if he just even hides him behind a building, that's some victory points for him, right? And then, you know, being like, well, you know, armor's going to be really good in the new edition, especially because you can run a lot of it. So what if we had one that was, well, and you get extra victory points for every armored vehicle that you remove? So
Yep.
now spamming those could be good, but it could also mean you cough up a lot of points if the enemy's really good at, say, you know, infantry manpad style weapons. They can get in, maneuver,
Mm.
get around, and knock out your armor devices, right? So, like, you know, just trying to find ways to be like, well, yeah, these are the general rules, but we're also going to incentivize and sweeten different styles of play.
Yeah.
And since I'm a Middle Earth guy, and Middle Earth, the way that they do it is they kind of group different scenarios in different pools that are
Mm.
based around different things. I was like, you know, it might be useful if I was a tournament organizer to be like, well, I'm going to pick one from just the kill stuff sort of pool, and I'm going to pick one from like a you have to get into your opponent's deployment zone pool, and we're going to pick one from like the get across the board sort of pool, or one that's you got to be in the middle in the scrum. You know, just right in the midst of all of it. You're not getting all the way into the deployment zone, but you can't hide in your own either.
Mm.
You know, just a mix and making it a little easier to choose between them because we've kind of broken them up and each pool has a different kind of feel to it and a different emphasis. So the result is that yeah, one night with an awful lot of chocolate milk, which is my drug of choice, and my wife looking over wondering what the heck I was doing,
Mm.
knocked out a bunch of scenarios, thought they were kind of interesting, and then added some more as the next couple of weeks went on. The next thing you know, there's a pack.
Mm.
It also kind of started off because, as you know, some of the armies from second edition didn't port over. So
Yeah.
China didn't come over, Australia
Yeah.
didn't come over. I also had some issues with this. Well, Slovakia didn't come over from the other one, but I've also just had some issues with like, I really wish the Commonwealth was kind of better represented instead of just basically being Britain, sans
Yeah.
Australia.
Yeah.
You know, and so I was like, well, you know, it'd be kind of fun to play around with those, but some of those are just kind of taking their time and coming. But I was like, well, in case people want to use them, it's like, hey, if you're using this pack, here you go. It's an army list. If you want to play with the army that you love, is it the meta? Probably not. But at least you have it, right? You can
Yeah.
play with the fun stuff that you own, and I feel like that's a useful thing. And then at
Mm.
the very end, I was like, you know, I'm just going to include trains because I like trains. I think trains are awesome.
Yeah, you
Maybe
dedicated
not
a
when they
whole section of your pack to train rules.
well, I found some of it was kind of broken, and some of the point
Yeah.
costs in second edition, especially near the end with Case Blue, were pretty bonkers.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, okay, we should probably tinker and tweak some of those a little bit. But I was also like, yeah, you know, like some people really love it. They want to play it. I know it causes problems for board design. Like there's a lot of stuff you got to think about when it comes to trains. But I'm like,
Mm.
well, people want to play with it. It'd be nice to have them because I don't think currently we have them anywhere in
No.
third edition. I appreciate that third edition did bring some new stuff into the rules manual, like actual hardcore rules for this is how you do combat jump with paratroopers, and this is how you do minefields, and this is how you do. Now we don't have 6-inch or 8-inch barbed wire sections depending on which book you're taking it from.
Yep.
Like they standardized a lot of that. And there was just a side of me that kind of wished low key that they standardized trains. So I was like, well, I'm going to standardize trains and just see what happens. So
Yep.
we'll see.
What about V3 as a whole? Because like a lot of this was informed by you just reading V3 books and going, I'm going to start this game, I'm going to get into it, and I might as well just go all the way. So what do you think about V3? You haven't played that much V2 at all, have you?
No, I came in the Twilight era. I was in for
Yeah.
like maybe a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
So the meta was pretty established by that point.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have guys like yourself who started playing around with like LVTs and stuff like that near the end. But on the whole, like most people knew this is the strategy, this is the style that you want to do for pretty much every army. In third edition, I find it shakes it up a little bit. As somebody who primarily plays minor nations, like I technically own all of the Axis and Allies nations. But I tend to find myself drifting a lot more toward minor nations. Third edition is a real boon because of the spam. I know spam gets a bad rap, understandably so. Sometimes it's deserved. But the fact that, in a lot of cases, you even have some minor nations that just don't even get tank options. They don't even get armored car options. Like they're already starting with hand behind
spam light mortars, right?
Exactly. And now at least they can do something, they can spam a ton of AT rifles, right? Or, they can be like, well, what I can't make up for in armored vehicles, I'm going to make up for in an artillery platoon, right? And so you have options for that, which I think is a boon to the minor nations. On the flip side, I think it does mean that, there is always going to be the room for those skew lists that are just going to feel very unfun.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, maybe there's some room for kind of reining those in either with actual erratas and rule changes or just a tournament organizer saying, guys, that's not what I want to do here. I want people to enjoy themselves so they come back so we actually grow a community. I don't want to have a constant revolving door of people trying something, having a bad experience and going home and never coming back. And so like, I think there's a lot of room for some adjustments there. I haven't necessarily written any of those down into the pack as of yet, just because I play with a very specific group of guys that are like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that man. So because of that, they haven't yet. But I guess as we see more stuff from the international arena, I might just be like, maybe we need to limit these, or maybe we need to, put a cap on how many rifle platoons you can run or something like that. So.
Yeah, it may happen at some point. Because there is something with the platoon structure and what you can take in different platoons, right? It can become. I mean, I recently sat down and created a platoon with I think it was six artillery observers.
Oh yeah, you talked about that one where you're getting artillery literally every single turn.
Yeah,
going off
and just shooting 2 each turn, and I mean. The opponent is just not playing the game at the end, which is anywho, I don't want to break what you guys at home are doing. You shouldn't do this. It's not fun. On your channel, the videos that I watch the most from you are like deep dives into one specific unit. You did one about snipers and one about MMG teams. Where you sort of lay out the math and you sort of give an overview and a review of the unit. Was that the plan from the start? Was that what you started out thinking? I'm going to because I have stuff to say about this.
That was basically the thinking. I mean, I'll be honest. The conversation that comes up most commonly would be somebody commenting on somebody's Facebook thing saying, "Your problem is you should take a light mortar."
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I'm not personally a big fan of the light mortar. I think they can work. I think they work a lot better in third edition than they did in second edition, for a lot of reasons. And I do appreciate that the rules team kind of sat down and said, okay, we probably need to give it a little more of its own niche. We need to make it a little more usable for counter battery fire specifically. So that extra range was a real boon. I think in my mind, it just takes too much mental brain power for me to make it work. And so me knowing myself, if I'm going into a tournament where I got 3 to 5, 6, or maybe even more games, I don't want to spend that much brain power on
No.
the first couple games, so I
It's
wouldn't
rough.
run them in a
Right. Yeah.
tournament personally. But in a casual game with friends at night where I know we're playing one match, we might not even get through the whole thing because at some point we all got to go home because we got to work in the morning or whatever. Then it's fun to play with. So I've been painting up a bunch of them recently that I didn't have before.
Yeah.
But it really started with like, well, I'd like to just do a deep dive on like reasonable expectations, what you can actually expect from a unit, so that you don't end up with like, well, everybody says that
Mm.
video that's coming up, AT rifles are awesome, but for me, they never work. And it's like, well, yeah, they're probably only going to do X number of hits with X number of wounds and X number of pins every game. So as long as you understand that and take 4 of them,
Yeah.
then they'll probably
Exactly.
work for you. It kind of works out. But yeah, that's kind of where I started. And maybe it's not so surprising because my starting with learning about bolt action was watching your channel and
Mm.
watching Hollywood Wargaming.
Yeah.
And I know he's gotten busy, so he hasn't really put out any new stuff with third edition.
Not a lot. No.
But that was basically what he did, right? He would
Yeah.
just kind of every week he'd go through a new unit, kind of talk over what it was good for, what it wasn't,
Mm.
that sort of stuff. And I found that to be pretty useful. I disagreed with him a little bit on some of the math. And so that's why I was like, okay, well, hey, I'm just going to add a math spin, and that's going to be my thing that I
Yeah.
go into it. And also just seeing it as a historical learning opportunity, right? Where
Mm.
again, there's a lot I didn't know about certain armies and how they utilize certain weapons, and so it was kind of fun to be like, oh, so that's how that works. That's interesting. And so, little stuff like that. But yeah, I kind of saw the channel mostly starting with those kinds of reviews, and then recently people have been, ironically, they've been sending me their army list before they fight stuff, and I just have to caveat and be like, now I'm new in town. There's a lot that I
You
don't
should
know,
think
so.
about that a lot before you start doing that.
It's true. That's why you haven't seen any. So I'll kind of Facebook message back and be like, well, have you thought about maybe the fact that if you're going to run multiple rocket launchers, a flamethrower can really throw off a multiple rocket launcher? Because if you're within 6 inches, which is where the flamethrower wants to be, you're going to cause your rocket launcher to automatically miss. So make sure you're using them in different spots,
Yeah.
but that's literally the extent I can really give people advice. Mostly it's just, look, here's the people you should be looking at. Take a look at their advice because they've actually played at high levels of competition. So they know what they're talking about. Me, I'm just a dude on the internet who enjoys the game, and I'm just doing this because I think it's fun, and I do a little bit of math. but yeah, so
But
we'll see
a
how
lot,
things
for a
change
lot
as we
of
go forward.
people, I think the math is where you start, because
Mm.
the reason why someone like me might say that AT rifles are awesome or light mortars are awesome, that's because I have the tactics and the mental capacity, I think, perhaps to use them in the way that makes them awesome. I know they're highly vulnerable and only likely to do as like that many hits, whatever. But I use them in all my army lists now because I know how to work them. I know how to make them work. But I think for a lot of people, especially if you're starting out, the math is just way more useful, actually. So I would highly suggest if you're a new player, go and watch Centaurs here, Aaron's videos on this, because they're really helpful in getting the right expectations for you, for your units. What can you actually expect them to do?
Sweet.
Can I ask you about one thing? I didn't
Sure.
actually, because one of your videos was about the light AT guns.
Yes.
Um, do you recommend them or not?
So I think for certain armies, they're one of the better options you can take because of the limitations of the list. Right.
Okay.
So if you know that and I think maybe even going further back, it depends on strategy, and strategy and tactics are not the same thing. I'll probably do a video at some point on this. Strategy is like, okay, so overall, like, for example, when I'm facing armor, am I trying to remove it? Or am I just trying to pin it so it's less effective? Maybe it has to spend the entire game rallying. Maybe I even cause the crew to run away. Because those are two very different things. If your goal is just to pin it out and just toy around with it or make it less effective, the AT gun could be done a lot more usefully with, say, an autocannon of some kind. The anti-tank gun, if you're trying to do removal, is a relatively cheap way to get a decent chance at removing most armor that you're actually going to see. In my experience, you don't tend to see yourself removing an enemy vehicle, though, before a mortar has your name on it.
Oh, yeah.
And so because of that, I have found that I have still not really been going in the direction of the AT gun.
Hmm.
I think if you can keep it kind of on a flank, watching for outflankers, I think it's fantastic because you'll probably pop the transport pretty much the first time you shoot at it. But beyond that, I'm like, do I really want to devote that many points to a thing that may or may not happen? And if you're like Bulgaria or Partisans, they can't outflank on you in the first place. So you really wouldn't choose it with somebody like those. So On the whole, I'm less than enthused, but I can see why some people would want it, especially if they don't want to spend a whole lot of points on anti-tank and they're like, well, I'm going to take 3 of these like they did historically. I'm going to spread them out across the table, and then I'm going to put them on ambush as often as I can, basically.
Yeah.
And we're just going to watch lines and go from there. But I mean, I was talking with Joe Lint the other day, and he made a really good point of being like, there's a lot of cover nowadays. Like, you're not going to have a lot of open lines. By the time they get to you, they're going to be shooting at you. And maybe you get 1, maybe 2 turns off before they've got you. And so at that point, is it worth it? I think that's a fair point. So
Yeah. Right. So you obviously own quite a lot of different armies. If you gravitate to minor nations, what is the next minor nation you're building?
So I actually kind of talked about this recently. I'm playing around with Greece, which is weird because I'll be honest, until I got into bolt action, I forgot Greece was even in World War II. Like I guess something in my mind said that like the Balkans were quickly overrun. It all kind of joined in with the Axis, and they were onward toward the Caucasus Mountains pretty early on, which I think technically is kind of true. But like apparently there was a whole lot of fighting there. Like the Italians actually had to completely pull back. The Germans took over operations there. Like it was a whole thing. And then the Italians even went on to fight with the British down in North Africa and up into Sicily and Italy as well. So like technically they were in it for a while. And so, yeah, the result is that I've been painting up some cavalry because I still believe in close combat.
Cavalry!
And we've got some, so we got some veteran cav run around because that's the only way I've ever run cavalry, including in 2nd edition, because I just didn't know what the boards would have, and I didn't assume I have enough cover to make regulars actually stick around. But yeah, we also do like some double light auto cannons, a lot of mortars, a lot of AT rifles, some machine guns, that sort of stuff. Just kind of playing around with like 50, 60 infantry. Like you can actually go really heavy into it. And to some extent, even sometimes leaving the armored platoon at home because their armor is not good. Get decent amount of machine guns on like tankettes and cars and stuff, but those got halved. So like, they're useful, but they're not as game breaking as they might have been.
Not super useful anymore. No.
Yeah. So I've actually been running recce platoons just so that I can take the cavalry in that one, and I can take more bodies with light machine guns and tough fighters and stuff like that, just to deter people from running into me and provide enough cover for the heavy weapons to do the actual job. But yeah, so it's been fun. It's been really fun. I think and they got an interesting cross section of special rules where I was like, well, I might want to outflank in some guys in a transport, and they ignore that penalty, which is great. They get the double light autocannon, which in my mind is fantastic. I like it for the cost. For firepower, admittedly, stationary firepower, but for firepower, it's not horrible.
Yeah.
They've got a mix of, they got some good veteran cavalry. They've got easy access to tough fighters, even on their regular infantry. I haven't gone the VB launcher route just yet because, I haven't had a lot of fun with light mortars yet, but we'll see. I might end up picking those up and running with those because why not? It's new and in addition, so might as well play around with new stuff and see what you like. And when you own a 3D printer, it's just easier to pick up new stuff that you don't know if you'll use a lot.
So easy. So easy.
So yeah, if I was buying metal models for it, I probably wouldn't experiment as much. But I figured I'd try that out. And then I've been collecting a Belgian army as well, which I haven't talked about on the channel yet. Because I have this, in 2nd edition, I had this crazy theory that Belgium was actually just a better version of France, which is probably a controversial statement, but I liked the BAR better. You still get the Berlier. And so I liked it. In 3rd edition, we'll see, just because LMGs are a lot more competitive. The armor for Belgium is really light. A lot of it is open topped. So like, it's like you're really playing with fire in a situation where a lot more things are going to be shooting at you. But they're tiny. They're super tiny, so you can hide them behind buildings super easy. You can pop out from places that other vehicles can't even fit. So I'm like, I kind of want to just play around with that. We'll see what happens. And then you just like lots of field cars to move people up if you really need to do that. So we'll see. Just playing around with something new because hey, we got new rules and a new edition, so might as well give it a try.
And someone needs to play those minors.
Exactly. And I have every tournament that I've been to, because like I think I've played Americans once, but otherwise I always play minor nations. I was like, oh, dude, I've never fought a Belgian army or a Polish army or something like that before. This is so fun. And I was like, well, great.
People can actually be quite surprised by what the minors can do when they've never faced them before.
Yeah, less options. But if you take the options that you have, winnow those down to the ones that work for you, and then you have a good solid strategy behind it, like you can get some wins out of it, which is great. And you can at least show them like, wow, okay, this is an actual legitimate army. They're not a meme. So that's cool.
You can also run into like the one army that's the hard counter to yours. I have taken my partisans to tournaments and in the end run into a Polish Lancer list and just got completely wiped because I can't do anything. They're much
It's
better in
true.
close combat than me. So yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
Anywho, um, Aaron, if you owned Warlord Games, like if you made a gazillion dollars off this YouTube thing, right? And you bought Warlord Games because who wouldn't want to do that?
Yeah.
So now you own it. You own the majority share. What are you gonna do? If you could like make a new version of the game or change it via an errata, what would you do?
So, well, it won't surprise people that I have thoughts on changes because pretty much every single video that I release has like and if I was king for a day, this is what I would do to change these things. Honestly, I would keep most of third edition. I actually really like third edition. I love the fact that it is really trying to get back to closer to an actual order of battle without getting too deep where like,
Hmm.
British rifle sections only have 3 infantry choices, whereas Americans have 4, right? Or
Yeah.
something like that. Like they don't have to go too deep down into that. But I do think it definitely helps, especially the minor nations quite a bit. And it kind of evens out the playing field a little more. But I would like to see, like some little changes. I think one change I would make in light of the new Armies of the United States book that's coming out, I do kind of wish that each of the subtypes kind of played a little bit differently.
Hmm.
And right now, paratroopers and Marines kind of look the same, except that if you run regular Marines, you don't have to take stubborn on them.
Yep.
Whereas with paratroopers, you're kind of locked into all of them have to be veteran. But you can then get the benefit of stubborn on everybody. I do kind of wish that we saw, for example, maybe the U.S. Marine Corps kind of got something similar to what they had in second edition, where you could buy a pistol on everybody. And the special rule for the U.S. Marine Corps is that pistols gain the assault keyword. And if we locked in things like, say, assault on pistols into specific subtypes for armies
Yeah.
or something else like that, then it's a lot harder to be gamey about it
Yeah.
because you can test that, quite thoroughly in advance of releasing the rules to make sure, well, yes, you can do that with this army, but they're also lacking in other stuff over here, right? And so you could kind of make that work.
Yeah.
There's a side of me that wishes that partisans were both Axis and allies.
Hmm.
In terms of how it was worked out, and that their choices would change. So,
Yeah.
an Axis partisan unit would get access to, say, captured Soviet equipment, maybe even captured Lend-Lease equipment. So you
Yeah.
might have a partisan army with, say, an M3 Stuart, for example, which
Oh, you're
is
speaking my language now.
interesting. It's
Yeah.
interesting, right? You get alligators, which is
Yeah.
interesting. Bren carriers for partisans, which I don't necessarily would necessarily be the best way to do it, but if you want to run 5 veterans with submachine guns and a Bren carrier, why not? I don't have a problem with that.
Hmm.
Something like that. And then kind of similar to, and I mean, you've talked about this before, but if maybe there were different types and styles of rules for everyone. So you'll
Yeah.
notice in the pack, we include, updated army special rules for a bunch of nations, just because I don't really like the copy paste. The first book that I ever bought was Army of France and the Allies, where most of the army special rules are copy paste
Yeah.
from one nation to the next.
Yeah.
And so, just playing around with different things, where everybody feels a little bit different. I haven't released the Romania video yet, but you can see it in the pack. Like, because of the fact that the Romanians did a lot of like, okay, we're going to do like artillery assaults followed by infantry waves. Like whenever your artillery get to perform stuff, it sometimes allows infantry that are near them to perform maneuvers
Yeah.
or, something else like that. So that way, like you actually get this tandem warfare thing that will hopefully make people play a little more historical, but also in a different way that's interesting and unique
Hmm.
without going quite as far as, say, like, in 40K, where there's so many special rules for so many different
Yeah.
armies that you're
Yeah.
just like, well, I'll just take your word that that's how it works because I have never heard of
I don't
this.
know. Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you say you hit on twos, fine, you hit on twos. I don't care. It's too much. So, trying to hit a balance, but I would probably lean a little more into that. And I'd go really deep. I'd bring on a bunch of people from the community to help me out. So, when making the book Tied to the Dutch, I would
Hmm.
just bring in Andrew Ellerby
Yeah.
and be like, hey, dude, like you've gone deep down the rabbit hole on what the KNIL had, what the Dutch army had. Like, can you help me out with just making sure I cover all the bases, make sure the scenarios look right, make sure that the army lists look correct. Just bring in those people. I'd probably build a collection of people who have been to big high-end tournaments and just be like, hey guys, under an NDA with words for months instead of numbers because
Yeah.
Americans and Brits don't do things the same way. We've seen problems with that before.
Yeah.
Just saying like, hey guys, like just, I would love to see some hits on this. What is broken? Show me what's wrong. And just like get together a group of like, 50 to 100 people to do that. Because when I released my role play game, which is fair to say, like we sold less than 200 copies. So we are the definition
Yeah.
of an indie role play game. We had over 100 beta testers. for
Yeah.
it before it launched, and they caught a lot of stuff. They caught a lot
Mm.
of typos. They caught a lot of this. If you pair these things together, you're going to be a pretty broken combo sort of stuff, which allowed us kind of rein in some of the crazy before it came out. I think just my background with gaming would mean I try to do that as much as possible and just be
Yeah.
like, hey guys, like y'all know it doesn't hurt me for y'all to know it's coming because you guys can hype it with your groups because you guys are, if you play at the highest levels of competition, you're willing to travel to tournaments and stuff. Like, I'm sure you have a local gaming group. Just like, hey, like you're our best ambassadors, so help me to figure out where the problems are because I may not
Yeah.
see it. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I would probably do.
That all sounds very good. I think Alessio and Marcus should potentially give you a call.
Well,
Anywho,
and if for whatever reason they're listening, I will volunteer hours. Like I'm more than glad to do that because again, like I just do this for fun, right? Like
yeah,
this is fun. It's enjoyable for me. I love the community. I love the people here. The Middle Earth community is a really fun, solid community too. But the bolt action community, they're just I don't know what it is. Like it's just a really kind, really good group of people.
mm,
All the guys and gals I've ever played with, they've just been really gracious, really fun. We've enjoyed it. We jump on discords and stuff like that afterwards to meet up and continue talking and stuff. And so like if there are little tiny things that I can do to help out with stuff, if it's even if it's just research, just to make sure that all the options are there, glad to help with that because why not? It could be my little tiny contribution to the greater sphere of bolt action, and
but
that'd be fun.
until Alessio and Marcus calls you, I think you should do more of the math back in your channel. Aaron, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. You should go and watch some of Aaron's videos now because they're really great. I really enjoy those deep dives. Make more of those, please. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to be on here.
Right. That's it from us today, and we will see you next time. Cheers.